Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Wired In Kontek Conversations. I have with me, as always, my illustrious guest, Marques Manning, and we are going to be talking today about why complex AV projects fail and how we can prevent that. So, Marques, you have been doing this work for a long time, doing a lot of amazing multi-$100,000, multi-million-dollar AV projects for very large institutions, organizations, healthcare operations, and there are a lot of things that can go wrong in a project of that size. And so when you have this kind of complexity, you have this kind of scale, so many things can go wrong. So what I want to do is I want to hear from you, what is it that goes wrong? Where does it start? Where should people start thinking about some of these problems up front? And then what do you think maybe advice or implementation or insights that you have because of your experience that listeners can take away knowing this is the way that you should actually go through these kind of projects and do this kind of work? So I'll start at the very top. What goes wrong in a project of that size? Like, where do we get it wrong and where should we start? What do you say?
All right. That is pretty easy. So I'll chime in with first and foremost, you don't call us right away. And I'm just kidding. That's we'll get there. But no, honestly, one of the first areas where we see a project go off track is actually in getting stakeholder buy-in, right? You got to be dreaming with the right people, bring the right people to the table. It's mission critical for getting to the end of the project and making sure you develop the space that people actually are interested in. And so with that, architects do great. They have a programming session and they're really great on bringing in everyone involved. So if you're dealing with the university level, maybe they're bringing in student government, they're bringing in professors, they're bringing in deans, everyone that's involved that may go through a space. In our world, in the AV side of things, we may call it a needs analysis, but really we refer to it as a dreaming session, right? We want to sit down and we just want to hear from everyone. Who is using the room? How do you want to use it? What should it look like? How should it function? Do you use a Mac? Are you Windows based? All these things, they seem like, the minutia of what may be happening, but they're mission critical and starting to kind of lay the foundation of, okay, what is this space? What is it going to look like? How is it going to function? Who needs to use it? That's really the beginning of everything. If you miss out on these key stakeholders, and we've seen it happen occasionally where you get to the end of a project and the folks that are actually using the room were never consulted in the process, and they walk in day one and say, well, where is this? Well, where is that? Well, this is how I actually work every day. And so their workflow is impacted, or you end up having some users that just aren't really thrilled about the space. And that can be extremely deflating. There are situations we get into where, say it's a bid environment where, someone may have driven the whole spec and they talk to, one person, but then that person didn't do due diligence to bring everyone to the table. And that's how you kind of end up there. So that's one of the more painful areas. And it's really the human part of where you can get off track, because without that human input, you're going to be lost. You're just dealing with, boxes and computers and cabling. Anyone can do that, right? We can just fall out of bed and design a conference room, but that doesn't mean it's the right conference room for every single user. And when you see a lot of folks talking about return to office, how do you bring people back and make them feel heard about, their workspace? And some of that just goes into that same mindset of, hey, let's bring them to the table. Let's sit down. Let's talk about, how do you need to work? When I walk into a conference room, maybe I only have my phone with me. I just want to be able to join from my phone, throw it to the room, and I'm good to go. Maybe I'm a laptop person, right? I always have my laptop. I don't leave home without it. I never do, honestly. This is my personal life. I don't go anywhere without my laptop. But, maybe I want to come in and connect with the cable, right? Or maybe I want to cast. Or maybe I don't want to come into the room with anything. Maybe I just want to walk in. There should already be a keyboard and mouse there. And, we have what we call host PCs. They're always in the room. I just want to come in and show up and start typing away and log in and do what I need to do, right? These are all very different experiences in the grand scheme of how a room should function. But if you haven't had a conversation, how do you know which one is right? Someone once told me, hey, Marques, you guys are experts. Just go ahead and give them a conference room and, let's show them something. Well, that's not what we do. That's not how we approach it. Because our goal is to really wow and delight clients. We want them to come in and we want to be very happy, right? And we want the system to be easy to use. It should be very intuitive, make a ton of sense. And then we solve all of their communication issues. Because at the end of the day, that's why we're doing this. We're helping people communicate.
So what I'm hearing is if you are thinking about a large AV project for, a space that you're designing, thinking about, you've got, maybe architecture plans, whatever it might be, as soon as you can bring in the AV experts into that, what you call like a dreaming phase, like let's start at the very beginning, let's get all the right people in the room and all the things that we will need from the big vision, the big dream, down to the details. Like I imagine you could say something like, okay, so you're going to walk in the room and what are you going to have with you and where are you going to sit and what kind of media are you going to be streaming or how are you going to be using it? And so you're walking through these details, but the details matter. And I know you're very technical and your team's very technical, but those details really impact how you're going to design things and what you're dreaming about. Is that fair? Is that my assessment of that? Is that how you guys think about it?
100%. 100%, because someone's dream of the space is what drives us to the technical drawing, the technical concept, and that's how you start to get into the weeds of, okay, I need cabling here, I need infrastructure here. So but primarily it starts at that dreaming phase, because without that, how do you know what you're actually designing and that it's correct?
You mentioned something before that if you don't do that very, very first step correctly, the problems just compound from there. Can you expound on that a little bit? Because I found that kind of interesting.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So, I may have a client and I say, okay, they want a conference room. Gotcha. We have a conference room. All right. So we'll have a display up, camera, microphone. Well, no one, spoke to the client and they said, well, we actually come in with a laptop and we need to connect at the table. Okay. Well, if you finish construction now, how exactly do you expect to get that cable from the laptop to the display? And people think, well, it's just a cable. No. When you're doing it commercial AV, our big thing is aesthetically, we want the room to look awesome. So, from that just one statement of, oh no, I always come in with my laptop and I want to connect to the table. Well, the behind the scenes work there is, okay, well, now I have a cable. It's going through a box in a table someone has to cut out. Well, now I'm going down into the floor. I need a floor box. Well, now I'm going through conduit over to the wall. Now I'm going up the wall into this. So there's all this stuff happening in the background just because someone said, no, I want to come in with my laptop. I don't want to do it wirelessly. I want to connect. Just that one statement drives all of the rest of that to happen in that room. And if you missed it because you didn't know users came in and they want to always have a physical connection. Some folks, they don't love Wi-Fi for whatever reason. They don't want to cast. They don't want to do any of that. And sometimes, it could be because their IT environment may be challenging. They don't do it. Or if a guest is coming in, they don't have the capacity to be on the Wi-Fi and, wirelessly share or something like that. So there's lots of reasons for it. But just by missing that part of the conversation, you would leave out that key detail. And what people then start to miss is now your budget is going to escalate because to go back in, we're talking about core drilling the floor and pulling content. There's all these things that have to happen. So yeah, we've seen it happen where, the question just didn't get asked. And when you're sitting down really thinking your way through something, or a user just walks in, it's like, oh, well, how do I connect this? Like, oh, well, we were under the assumption that you were doing wireless. They said, nope, I do physical connections. Okay. We go from there.
That's terrifying. But
it is.
But it also reminds me, I had an electrician out recently, and I was thinking of moving my office under the stairs. There's a little closet in there, and I was like, but I really love Ethernet because it's about 4 times faster than my Wi-Fi. So I was like, can we get the Ethernet that's in my office over there? And I'm thinking, well, it's only like 20 feet. That shouldn't be a big deal. And he was like, yeah, we can't do that because it's got to go through the ceiling. It's got to go through insulation, all these joists that are across the ceiling into the crawl space of the attic that you can't actually access. And it was like a nightmare when he was explaining it to me. And I was like, okay, well, I guess I'll use Wi-Fi in that office. So I get what you're saying. It
is very, very real, man. Yeah. It's very real. And depending on what you're doing, right? If you're doing a lot of streaming, a lot of content, or I'd say especially high-end video, like video editing, you really do need that, and it has to be thought out because, trying to do that or move files wirelessly, I'm not into a whole diatribe about wireless and understanding it. Yes, that's my background as well. But it's like, hey, if I can get a cable, please give me the cable. Yes. I realize that when you download and upload like 4 gig files, I can't do it on 30 megs a second. It's not going to happen. So nope.
So I get that. Okay, so talk to us a little bit about. We have some other episodes planned in the future. One that I can't wait to get to, where you say stop buying things on Amazon, and so I want to get to that. But before, I really want to set the table of the kind of like dreaming discussions that you have with folks, and kind of what's at stake when you're having these kind of conversations. And so, if you could walk us through your process of when you're working with a client and somebody's dreaming, how you go from that dreaming stage down into the implementation. So let's say somebody is like, okay, here's what I actually need out of the space. And I bring my laptop, I want to sit at the table, and I plug in my, I like to plug in my cord. And so we need, holes here and do this and that. How does that get down to the implementation phase? And like, how do you bring in all of these very, very detailed technical insights that you need in that very beginning stage, brought down into the design team, the implementation team, and support? Because I know you've got this really great proven process over decades of doing this. So walk me through like, okay, we got that meeting, and then now we need to like actually execute and implement this space. What does that look like, that process?
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the keys and the foundation of our process is actually being slow, right? Because being slow up front and taking our time up front, it actually yields dividends by the time we get to the end, and I'll get there for that part. But, you end up speeding up at the end because you catch so many things early on. So
I love that.
First and foremost, when we start dreaming, we're just listening. At that point in time, no matter what someone is telling me, I'm just listening, making sure I understand what they're trying to achieve, what they hope the room will do, and then also what are the must-haves, right? Because you have your needs and you have your wants. And oftentimes the budget's going to dictate how much of both things you're going to get. But at that point in time, we're just listening. That's it. We want to see the space. Now, behind the scenes, not only did we listen, we're documenting. We're taking tons of measurements, taking photos. We're gathering all this information because, once we've had that dream session and really talked through what you want this to be, well, our next step is really to get back to our team and say, hey, here's what we have. Here's what they're talking about. Let's come up with, a budget and a concept, right? We call it our innovate phase, but we're really going to sit down, take all of these assets that we've gathered, all this information, and we work with our technical team. So we're divided up. We have account managers, we have design team members and support team members and finance and all of these folks, right? So at different stages in our process, they're all going to be involved. But early on, it's primarily our account managers and our design team members. And it's really just taking all of that feedback, and then the design team just gets to work sketching it out, saying like, okay. And when I say sketch it out, it's quite literal. Some hand sketch, some will do it all computer based, but we're just doing some rough things to say, okay, let's drop this here, drop this box here. We need cabling, because that visual also helps the team really understand, how does this connectivity look? How is this really needing to happen? And then from there, what we end up doing is kind of getting the budget ready and making sure we can get that to the client to say, okay, here's what we heard you say. Here's how we understood the project. Here's kind of what we put together. Is this directionally correct? Is this what you had in mind? Is this what you're thinking about? They say yes, then we go full bore into designing, right? And that's really the bells and whistles of it. Because early on, we never want to crush someone's dream. I'm not a fan of dream crushing if I can help it. I never want to tell someone we just can't do something until we really get into the weeds and see like, okay, what needs to happen? Because I'll tell people, no is not the answer. There can be a no, but, or like, I can't do this, but I can do something else, because we're still trying to get to this end result for the client. And so, once we're aligned on, we understand the concept, we're aligned budgetarily, and we really start designing, that's where we kind of take off on things. Because again, when you see a room, is the wall, is it drywall? Does it have steel studs? Is it brick? All of that affects how we're going to need to connect things to the wall. How are we going to run cabling? Can we go through the wall to get up to the ceiling? Do we have to surface mount? Can we go through the floor? That's really where our design team starts really putting together a lot of these details. And our account managers would have caught it in the room anyway. That's part of our site survey. We're really picking up details about what is the physical structure that we're going into. What are the little nooks and crannies, things we have to think about. It's never necessarily perfect, because sometimes even clients don't know. They can't get you an architectural package. We once had a situation where we were at a table, we saw a floor box, there was a display on the wall, it was only maybe 15 feet away. Okay, and this should be straightforward. Everyone said, yeah, we have conduit, we're good to go. Once our guys got involved, they realized the conduit routed back out of the room, down the hall, looped around, and it came all the way back. So what we thought was 15 to 20 feet was more like 90 feet. So it's like,
Jeez.
Okay, but that's the importance of, we can't always calculate everything if we don't know and if the client can't tell us. But if you can give us architectural sets, electrical drawings, and all the schematics of your building, we will discover all that information. All that is laid out, and we can kind of cover all that. So once we get to that part of it and we're good to go and the client activates with us, well, then our operations team steps in. That's our project management team, our installation team. And so here's where I say we save some time, right? Because on the front end, if we've really talked through everything, if we've gathered all the details, hey, I know that the display is going to be on the west wall. I know they also want one on the east wall. I know that there's going to be a camera at this height on the front wall. By gathering all that information and really taking our time to work through it up front, we now save a lot of time on the back end because when our operations team receives the final packages we put together internally, they know exactly what's happening. There shouldn't be too many changes. Will there always be changes? Absolutely. Right. It's just the nature of people and how things work. But for the most part, our job is to make sure that we've captured, 85 to 90% of everything that's going to be going on. And that speeds up our installation. So now we can be very, very efficient. We actually had a client recently who said, man, you guys are awesome. They finished that much faster than we thought they would. All of that really comes from the fact that we spent all this time up front. And again, it's a slow process on the front end, but it really helps us be as efficient as possible on the back end. And we try to be a no change order team, right? We want to make sure that when we give you a price and we give you a cost, it's correct. So that's also what drives some of that, time that we're taking up front to make sure we have it right. Because we don't do a lot of change orders. We just generally don't issue many of them unless the client just, had some turnover maybe, or someone new is involved in the project. And there's like, oh, you know what? I absolutely have to have this added. Okay, yeah, we'll change order to make sure that's correct. But generally, that's our policy is, we're doing our due diligence up front to try to capture all these things because no one wants to do that. If you're spending this kind of money, and honestly, you're spending any money, right? I don't care if it's $5,000 or $500,000. You don't want someone to come in all of a sudden and say, oh, by the way, it's going to be 10% more. Right? No one likes that. I don't like that in my life. If I think I'm paying one price and next thing you know, it's something else, I may just shut down.
Yep. Same.
Yeah.
What you're saying reminds me of that quote. It's attributed to the Navy SEALs, but they say that slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And I love that quote because that's kind of what you're talking about. Like, do your due diligence up front, get all the details right, take your time, because then that smooths everything else. And the back end makes it ultimately faster in the long term of the project. I love that.
Absolutely. It's to us, it's worth the time, right? It is 100% worth it. And we've even been told before, like, man, you guys are really slow. But that same client, once they saw us get into the project, they're like, oh wow, that was really fast. Like, yeah, that's why we spent the time. Plus, it is actually cheaper, right, to spend that time up front than to all of a sudden do all this discovery as you're on site trying to figure out what you're going to do. Now you're ordering parts, you're overnighting things, or you're spending all this money and all this time, and you could avoid all that just by a little bit more time spent up front.
Yeah. That old adage, measure twice, cut once. That
absolutely.
Kind of, yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, I want to pause or emphasize maybe that one point you made about the budget, where you present this kind of package or this budget to a client, and I'm sure sometimes it might seem like, wow, that's sticker shock. That's way more expensive than I thought. Do you have conversations like that? And how do you work through a process of what this budget comes to be based on what the dreaming session is like? What is the dream that we're trying to achieve? And then, well, this is what it takes to pull off. How do you have that conversation if there's pushback on the budget and as it relates to like a failure of a project? So what I'm thinking of here is like, okay, so let's say this is going to be $300,000 or $500,000 for this project, and that was more than they were anticipating. But maybe you have this conversation of like, well, in order for us to do that, it's going to require this, but requiring this is actually going to like save you money long term down the future. Do you have conversations like that? Like, how do you sort through that?
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, I have them on a regular basis.
I'm sure.
Yeah, and I get it. I always tell our team, the client's job, especially if you're dealing with a procurement team, they're trying to save money and be as efficient with dollars as possible. We are no different in what we do. Now, on the flip side, we want to make sure we keep everything fair. We don't want to price gouge and we don't want to lose money. We just want to make sure we deliver really, first and foremost, that we deliver on the expectations and make sure we do it at a fair price. So what I always encourage folks is if I'm just doing an initial visit, we're just sitting down listening. By this point, we've done so many projects and different types of projects, we kind of have an idea anyway about where the project will land. And so it's easy to just, in that initial conversation, we don't want to harp on it because we also don't want to get someone too far off pace of what they're hoping to have. So I may just say, hey, just FYI, what you're describing, we've seen something similar. It's about $150,000 that you budget that. Are you expecting that? Because if they say, oh, no, I've only budgeted $35,000. Let's take a quick pause to say, okay, let's really drill in to understand what do you have to have and what would you like to have? Because when you hit that point, if there's that big of a gap, you're completely misaligned. And you have to kind of really understand where everyone is at. It doesn't happen very often. And oftentimes, again, you can kind of curtail some of this just by having a quick conversation. It's not meant to be accurate. It's not meant to be the gospel. Yeah. It's just, hey, from what we've seen, you're going to be in this range. But then as you talk through things with folks, we do get asked quite a bit about our pricing. I always say this. I don't hide it. We are never, ever the cheapest option. Never. It's never happened. Not that I'm aware of. Every once in a while, okay, maybe 5% of the time. But we also don't try to be. What we've seen is when that happens, we're trying to make sure we've captured everything to do the project correctly. So again, what we show you in our final proposal, that's what you're going to pay, right? We don't want any surprises, any changes. We try to be as upfront and capture everything that we can. There's also, unfortunately, and this is in any industry, so, there's different manufacturers, right? And they operate at different price points. They have a different focus. And so for us, we partner with manufacturers that we can trust they're going to be there for the long haul, right? If we install something, we actually have systems right now that they're still running and they're probably 12 to 15 years old, right? And that's because we partner with the right manufacturers that provide hardware. We know how to configure it. There are cheaper options out there. So a client once asked me like, hey, would you be willing to change this out? Because I saw the manufacturers you all usually use, but there's some other manufacturers that I know are cheaper. Would you be willing to change? And it was a no. Said, hey, we're not going to be able to have alignment when it comes to that because again, we're not here to sell you boxes, right? We're not here to just sell you computers. We're here to bring our expertise into the conversation and what we've experienced. And part of that expertise comes from our support team. Support team has been doing it for a really long time. And they can tell you right away what fails, what doesn't fail, what works great, what they feel is terrible, right? And that is very valuable feedback that actually loops back into our design team so we can sit down and understand, hey, that video switcher, it failed 3 times just in the first month. There's a problem, right? Because then we want to have conversations with manufacturers when we do all these things. So with that happening kind of behind the scenes, that's kind of what drives our pricing, right? And then on the other component of that is just what we charge in labor. We have a full-time staff. We're big on training. I'm a big fan of education. Retaining staff is very challenging, right? I tell people all the time, the more skilled folks get in our industry, everyone's after the same people, right? We all do the same thing for the most part. Our process may be different. Some of our manufacturers are different. But yeah, we're big on training, and that just to retain staff, send out the trainings, bring people in to do more training, that just kind of drives the expense. And so by us being all full-time employees, it's a little bit different. There's different models out there, businesses. Some folks do all contracting. And, I don't judge any other company. We just have seen for us, they primarily drive what we're doing and have in-house. Our collaboration is much better. And our design team at any point in time, someone kind of spin around their chair and say, hey, have you used XYZ before? And does this work? And someone that used to work with us even said, like, that was pretty amazing because he rarely ever had to call the manufacturer to ask a question. We could just throw it out into the air, and between our design team or our support team, they know it, right? And then if we go over to install, they can tell us, oh, yeah, that actually takes, 2 hours because of whatever reason to do that versus, someone may think it's 30 minutes. So pricing wise, all of that goes into who we are, right? And that's something that we're not looking to really change. And we know it's also not for everyone. And that's okay too. I always tell folks, hey, Toyota makes Lexus for a reason, right? They're not all the same. Yeah. They're different demographics. They make cars. They're all cars, but it's really what do you want and what's the experience you want? And that's where we try to separate ourselves and really differentiate. No matter who shows up at your site, you're going to love them. They're going to be great. They're going to be highly skilled. I've actually had one of our larger clients say that to me once when he said, hey, it was our first project of that magnitude for them. It was probably, over $1 million in that neighborhood. And it was one room. It was highly complex. And he gave me a call and said, Marques, I got to tell you, everyone out here knows exactly what they're doing. They know how it should be happening. They're personable. Hey, that's great news. I love to hear that because that's who we want to have on our team, right? And we are our team. We work on so many things together all across the organization. So, and again, that goes from the first time you meet someone on the account team say if you're closing out with our finance team, it's all about a complete wow and delight across the entirety of our interactions. And, by no means are we perfect, but that's what we're going for, right? So when you put all that together, that's kind of how you get to that pricing. So that's really the story where people say right away, like, hey, well, you seem more expensive. It's not that we seem more expensive, it's that we are. Like, I want to just clear that up right now. We are definitely more expensive, but the return on your investment and the value we're bringing to the table is, again, from top to bottom, the expertise we're going to come in with, how we're going to make sure we're holding your hand through the process. You know exactly what's going on. Even if there's a bump in the road, hey, we'll pull in the right people to make sure that by the time this thing is done, you're going to be happy and your space is going to work as expected.
That feedback from that client you were talking about, that's got to be one of the most gratifying things as a business owner, is like, hey, your team is amazing. It's like,
it makes you feel great.
Nailed it. I love that. No, what you're saying, it reminds me of two things. One is, it's kind of like when you hire, an expert in any industry. You have an expert plumber or, anybody coming and doing a service for you. They could seem more expensive, but that they're going to do it right the first time. And that value, like you're saying, like the real ROI, when you look at like, okay, they did it right the first time and it just works. And then all the training that you have in your team and you keep them full time and they have that better collaboration, that expertise, like that really adds up. That compounds over and over and over again over the years.
And there's a quick example of that, what you're mentioning. And that'll be really quick, a quick aside to it. There's a client we met. They reached out to us. It was a project management firm. They'd hired someone to go do a project up in Washington, D.C., and it was a military project. And, they were in a bad spot. They had hired another company and they couldn't finish the project, right? They couldn't make it all work. So in our industry, and we'll talk about it in a later podcast, it was a system that's known as AV over IP. One of our partner manufacturers we work with all the time. We do them all the time. So we said, okay. I said, hey, tell me what's going on. Shoot me a list of your bill of materials so I can see what's happening. So I see it, and I'm talking to one of my teammates, Canell Smallwood. So shout out to him. He's also awesome. But we're talking about it, and he said, yeah, I feel pretty good about it. I can probably fix whatever's happening in, maybe 3 days tops. Okay, so it's a complex system, and we've never seen it. Never seen it. So he kind of gets a feel for it. He starts working on the code. So he drives up on a Sunday, and he's pretty much done by Monday. So and I didn't even know what all had happened until the client called me. He sent me this really long email, this great email. And he was just saying the experience was so off from the other team that he didn't have confidence in us coming in. He just thought we'd be another fly-by-night style company and, it'd be more of the same headache. This person had been fighting this battle to get this room working for almost 18 months, which I could not believe. I was like, I can't believe this. They're about to cancel the contract. All these things were about to happen. And so I said, Canell, myself and Mike Warner, we said, hey, if you need something, just call us remotely. We can support you and just let us know how it's going. So the client ends up telling me, he said, hey, man, we were so amazed. He's so professional. He knew exactly what to do. When he showed up, he had already had the program written and no one was expecting that. So they said he was able to get in there. He called the contractor back to fix the things that were incorrect. And then from there, he just got all the programming done, got everything configured, everything was working. So we kind of estimated maybe 3 days. It was about a day and a half, right? Amazing. And the client just could not believe it. To this day, the room was working perfectly. And it's one of those things where we talked to the project manager who was overseeing all this, and he said, hey, listen, I get it, right? I really do understand. Like, a lot of times there are these terms that get thrown about best value determination, lowest responsible bidder, and all of these terms. All that means is you're typically in a race to the bottom. Someone's going to try to do this as cheap as possible. And we have photos of this room. We saw how it was installed and we couldn't believe it. It just blew us away about how poorly it was actually installed in terms of like they had just gone to the store, I guess, to buy some Ethernet cables and probably off Amazon. No offense to Amazon at all. Don't sue me, please. But it's just, it was really substandard work. And we have some competitors out there that we call them frenemies. We're really close. We're all the same trainings. We see each other all the time. So we know we all have similar skills. Just our processes are different. But that experience was a quick reminder of like, this matters. Our experience matters. Us knowing what we're doing, it matters. Because again, they saved money by bringing in this company, but their room set for 18 months. So what was the real cost of that, right? What was the cost and the loss of belief in your internal stakeholders? The cost of the room being down and not being functional and having to find other places to do your events. all of that is kind of what gets hidden behind the scenes, and people don't think about it, but there's a real cost there, and there's really time, energy, and just kind of trust, like the capital of trust being lost because you brought a team in that couldn't do the job.
So that's why you invest in your team, which I love. The second thing I was going to bring up, because I love that point about the real cost of things. And so what you were saying earlier, and then that story, I've been seeing this this lamp by Dyson. It's like $1,000 lamp, and I'm like, who in the world would spend $1,000 on a lamp? But as I age, I'm 35, so I'm relatively young. But as I get older, I'm finding that I just want stuff that just works, and I'm willing to pay like a lot more money than I ever thought I would on lots of different things, whether it's a computer, a car, cookware, just anything around the house, a couch. And I just want things that work well, and I'm willing to like spend that money. So anyway, that's what makes me think of when you talk about, doing things the right way, having a solid team, even though, yes, it's a little bit premium. But when you think about the total cost, what you just said, like maybe that room sitting vacant for 18 months, like there's a huge cost to that may not show up on a P&L, but you see it in having to do other things, the distraction that it causes, the headache that it causes, the communication and collaboration, issues that show up later on, like the trust that's lost. All that stuff is very costly. That can't be quite quantified in a financial terms, but it does show up. And so, yeah, I love that emphasis. I think it's great. So in the last little bit here on this episode, last question for you is, if you were talking directly now to a decision maker, let's say at a large healthcare organization, a dean at a university, the head of a large, corporate organization that is like, okay, I think I have this project that I know is going to be important over the next, let's say, 8 to 12 months, into 2026. And I need to be thinking about this the right way up front. And I want to avoid the kind of problems that you're talking about. And I want to make sure I have my ducks in a row at the very beginning. What would you say to them? What advice or what takeaway or insight would you share after doing this for so long with so many different projects?
Yeah, the most important piece of advice I can think of would be bring in the right people early, right? Bring them in, get them a seat at the table, bring them into the conversation. You want whoever's going to be your technology implementation specialist, bring them in early on, right? Just to talk about what it is you're trying to do. They should be there as the architect is working through their drawings and putting together, and I mean early phase, schematic design, programming, like the early phases of the architectural process. Your technologists should be there also because they work together. We have several architects we work with very closely. We're working early on. Oh, can we move this wall? Can we add this? Can we add this electrical here? Oh, the client said, need X, Y, or Z. All of those conversations are happening before we ever get into construction documentation. And that's really the most important part there. So if you're a key decision maker, any kind of leader, make sure you're having that discussion as early as possible, because that way you're prepared for it, right? So there's the one issue of you don't want a project to close out and you didn't get what you want. But you also don't want to be in the middle of a project and see your construction costs going up by 10, 15, 20% because no one thought about the infrastructure that has to be in place to support what your dream is, right? I want a display that's going to be 20 feet tall and 40 feet wide. Awesome. So do I. They look great. But on the flip side, how are we supporting it? What is the structural, integrity of the wall? Is everything there? That probably needs, 15 independent circuits. There's all these other things that have to happen, and that conversation needs to happen early so it gets documented correctly. It gets, included with drawing set. Everyone's on the same page. That's the most important piece of advice, is bring everyone to the table early. Your technology specialists, your key opinion leaders, your users of the space, and everyone should just be in there collaborating, talking, working through, what is the space? It could be a room. It could be a building. It could be a campus. What are we trying to achieve? What are our goals?
That's great. I love that. So to summarize this whole conversation and talking about why complex AV projects fail, and to prevent that, to mitigate that, bring in key people early. Dream big, but do think about the tiniest little details. and go slow so that you can go faster later. Go slow in the beginning, do that measure twice, cut once kind of idea in the beginning. That way you can have a lot more velocity and value later on. Is that a fair
Absolutely.
summary? That's great.
Yeah, that's great. That's directly on point. You can come work with us anytime.
All right, I'm hired. I love it. No, this is great. I am not technical at all, and I could never work with you guys because you guys are amazing. So, but I love everything that you said. I thought it was fantastic, and I hope that there's a lot of value to our listeners and people thinking about these large projects that they have coming up. And if you have any more questions, or if you want to see more of our material, go to kontek.com, kontek.com, and you'll find all kinds of info there, and reach out to the team and try to prevent the problems that arise from complex AV projects. We will see you next time. Thanks, Marques.
All right, see you.